She married the billionaire CEO to save her mother, but he fell for her instead. I'll pay for your mother's cancer treatment if you marry me for 1 year. Eliza Morgan stared at the billionaire across the mahogany desk, his face unreadable as he delivered this life-altering proposition. Her hands trembled as she clutched her mother's medical reports. "Why me?" she whispered, voice breaking. Dominic Blackwood's steel-gray eyes met hers without emotion. "You're intelligent, presentable, and desperate enough not to cause problems. I need a wife for business purposes. You need $600,000. It's a simple transaction. A transaction. Her freedom, her future, her very life reduced to a business deal by a man who saw her as nothing more than a convenient solution. And if I refuse?" Eliza asked, already knowing the answer. Dominic leaned back in his leather chair. "Then I wish you and your mother the best of luck. I hear pancreatic cancer at stage 4 gives patients about 3 months without treatment." The cruelty of those words sliced through her, but the truth behind them hurt more. 3 months. Her mother, the woman who had sacrificed everything to raise her alone, had 3 months to live unless Eliza signed those papers. She picked up the pen, her entire body numb as she scrawled her signature on the marriage contract. What she didn't know then was that this cold arrangement would change both their lives in ways neither could have imagined. My friends, how far would you go to save someone you love? Would you sell your freedom? Your future? Your heart? If you're wondering what happens when a marriage built on desperation transforms into something neither party expected, stay with me. This story might just change how you see love and sacrifice forever. If you're new here, I'm Mr. Sterling, and I share stories that reveal the extraordinary depths of the human heart. Hit subscribe now, because I promise you, missing what happens next in Eliza and Dominic's journey is something you'll regret. My subscribers tell me these stories have changed their perspective on love forever. Can you really afford to miss out? If you're still hesitating, at least tell me why in the comments below. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. Eliza Morgan had always lived a modest life. The daughter of a single mother who worked 3 jobs to make ends meet, she'd grown up understanding the value of sacrifice. Their small 2-bedroom apartment in the less fashionable part of the city had never felt lacking because it was filled with love. Margaret Morgan had given everything to ensure her daughter had opportunities. She never had college education, dance lessons, summer camps, often going without herself. When Eliza graduated with honors and secured a position at a respected marketing firm, it felt like their struggles were finally behind them. For the first time, she could help ease her mother's burden. She convinced Margaret to cut back to just 1 job, promising to cover the difference in their expenses. "You've done enough, Mom," Eliza had insisted. "Let me take care of you for a change." Life had seemed so full of promise then, until the day Margaret collapsed at work. The diagnosis came like a thunderbolt from a clear sky. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, advanced, aggressive. The oncologist's words blurred as Eliza held her mother's hand, both of them frozen in disbelief. "There's a new treatment," the doctor explained, his voice softening with compassion. "Experimental, but showing remarkable results in cases like your mother's. It could extend her life significantly, possibly even lead to remission." Hope flickered in Eliza's chest. "Then that's what we'll do." "I should mention," the doctor continued, hesitation evident in his tone, "that because it's experimental, insurance won't cover it. The cost is substantial." "How substantial?" Eliza asked. $600,000 for the complete treatment protocol. The number hung in the air between them, impossibly large, cruelly final. "We'll find a way?" Eliza promised her mother that night as Margaret drifted to sleep, exhausted from the first round of standard chemotherapy. "I swear to you, we'll find a way." But finding a way proved nearly impossible. Eliza's savings amounted to barely $20,000. Her credit was good, but nowhere near sufficient for a loan of that magnitude. She approached charities, foundations, even started a crowdfunding campaign, but the amounts trickled in too slowly. Time was the one thing her mother didn't have. Desperation drove her to take a second job, bartending at high-end events. The pay was decent, and the tips sometimes generous, but it was a drop in an ocean of need. Still, she persisted, working herself to exhaustion, calculating and recalculating how long it would take to save enough. The answer was always the same: too long. It was at one of these events, a charity gala for medical innovation, that fate intervened. Eliza was serving champagne to the city's elite, forcing a smile despite her aching feet and the knowledge that her mother was alone in their apartment, suffering through another night of pain. "Excuse me," a deep voice said, as she navigated through the crowd with her tray. Eliza turned, and in that moment, someone jostled her from behind. The champagne flutes tipped, sending their contents splashing across an impeccably tailored suit. She froze in horror, looking up into the coldest gray eyes she'd ever seen. "I'm so sorry," she gasped, mortified. The man, tall, imposing, with sharp features that might have been handsome if not for their severity, merely glanced down at his ruined jacket. "It's just fabric," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. He reached into his pocket and extracted a business card, holding it out to her. "Send the dry cleaning bill to my office." Eliza took the card automatically, reading the embossed name, Dominic Blackwood, CEO, Blackwood Innovations. Everyone knew Blackwood Innovations, the tech giant revolutionizing medical equipment worldwide, and everyone knew its founder, the notoriously private billionaire who rarely appeared in public and never in the tabloids. She was holding the business card of one of the most powerful men in the country. "I'm really sorry, Mr. Blackwood," she repeated. But he had already turned away, disappearing into the crowd. Eliza never sent the bill. Between hospital visits and working double shifts, it seemed trivial. She tucked the card into her wallet and forgot about it until 3 weeks later, when an email arrived from an address she didn't recognize. "Miss Morgan, Mr. Blackwood would like to discuss a mutually beneficial arrangement regarding your mother's situation. Please call this number to schedule a meeting." Eliza stared at the message, confusion and suspicion warring within her. How did he know about her mother? Why would a billionaire CEO want to meet with her? It had to be a scam. Yet the email came from a Blackwood Innovations domain. Curiosity and desperation won out. She called the number and was immediately connected to a polite but efficient assistant who scheduled a meeting for the following afternoon at Blackwood Tower. The next day, Eliza sat in the reception area of the CEO's office, feeling woefully out of place in her best interview suit, the only professional outfit she owned. When she was finally ushered into Dominic Blackwood's office, her nervousness had reached a fever pitch. The office matched the man, sleek, minimalist, intimidating. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, a silent reminder of the power wielded by the man who sat behind the massive desk. "Miss Morgan," Dominic said, not rising as she entered. "Please sit." Eliza perched on the edge of the chair opposite him, hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Your assistant mentioned an arrangement regarding my mother. I don't understand how you know about her, or what this could possibly be about." Dominic studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. "I make it my business to know things, Miss Morgan. Your mother has stage 4 pancreatic cancer. You're trying to raise money for an experimental treatment that costs $600,000. Your crowdfunding page has raised less than $30,000 in 3 weeks. Time is running out." Eliza felt exposed, vulnerable. "Are you monitoring everyone who starts a medical fundraiser, Mr. Blackwood?" A flicker of something amusement perhaps crossed his face. "No. But the woman who spilled champagne on my suit at a medical innovation gala caught my attention. When I had you looked into your situation, presented an opportunity." "An opportunity," Eliza repeated, the word tasting bitter. "For what? Exactly." "A mutually beneficial arrangement." Dominic leaned forward slightly. "I need a wife, Miss Morgan, for 1 year. In return, I will cover all expenses related to your mother's treatment, provide you with a generous monthly allowance, and at the end of our arrangement, a divorce with a substantial settlement." Eliza stared at him, certain she had misheard. "You want to marry me? A complete stranger?" "The board is pressuring me to project stability," he explained. His voice is cool and detached, as if discussing the weather. "A family man image would be advantageous for our upcoming public offering. You're intelligent, presentable, and have no scandalous history. You need money for your mother's treatment. I need a wife, a business transaction, nothing more." "You can't be serious," Eliza said, rising from her chair. "People don't get married as business transactions. People get married for far less noble reasons than saving a parent's life." Dominic countered. "Think of it as a job with excellent benefits. You play the role of devoted wife, attend functions, sign a confidentiality agreement. In return, your mother lives." The bluntness of his statement hit Eliza like a physical blow. "Your mother lives." 3 simple words that cut through all her objections, all her moral qualms. "Why me?" she asked again, her voice barely audible. "You could hire anyone, models, actresses, women who move in your social circles. Those women come with complications, expectations, and often ulterior motives," Dominic replied. "You, on the other hand, have a clear motivation that aligns perfectly with my timeline. Your desperation makes you reliable." Eliza should have been offended by his assessment, but she was too stunned by the proposition itself to feel anything but numb. "I need time to think about this." "Of course." Dominic slid a folder across the desk. "The contract is inside. Review it with a lawyer if you wish, though I assure you it's quite straightforward. You have until tomorrow to decide." "Tomorrow? That's not enough time for—" "Your mother began another round of standard chemotherapy yesterday," Dominic interrupted. "According to her medical records, she's responding poorly. The experimental treatment needs to begin within the next 2 weeks to be effective. Tomorrow, Miss Morgan." Eliza took the folder with trembling hands and left without another word. That evening, she sat beside her mother's hospital bed, watching her sleep fitfully, thin and pale against the stark white sheets. Margaret had always been vibrant, strong, the kind of woman who faced life's challenges with a determined smile. Now, pain etched lines into her face, even in sleep. Eliza opened the contract, reading through terms that would essentially sell her freedom for 1 year. The financial provisions were generous, more than generous. All medical expenses covered, a monthly allowance that exceeded her current annual salary, and a settlement at the end that would ensure neither she nor her mother would ever worry about money again. In exchange, she would become Mrs. Dominic Blackwood. She would live in his home, appear at his side at public functions, and maintain the illusion of a loving marriage. The contract specified separate living quarters and emphasized that the arrangement was non-physical in nature, a business partnership disguised as matrimony. Pride urged her to throw the contract away, to find another solution, but as she watched her mother's labored breathing, Eliza knew there was no other option. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford, not when her mother's life hung in the balance. The next morning, she returned to Blackwood Tower and signed the contract. 2 weeks later, Eliza stood in the marble foyer of Dominic Blackwood's mansion, her new home clutching the marriage certificate that had been signed just hours earlier in a private ceremony, attended only by his lawyer and her best friend Zoe as witness. The house was a modernist masterpiece, all clean lines and open spaces, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered breathtaking views of the surrounding landscape. It was beautiful, impeccably designed, and utterly soulless, much like the man who owned it. "Your quarters are in the East Wing," Dominic said, breaking the silence as he loosened his tie. At 38, he was 12 years her senior, with sharp features that might have been handsome if they ever softened. Mine are in the West. "The staff has been informed that we prefer privacy in our personal spaces. Mrs. Chen will show you around tomorrow. I have calls to make." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Eliza alone in the cavernous entryway, the echo of his footsteps fading, along with any illusion that this was anything but a business arrangement. A middle-aged woman appeared silently at her side. "Miss Morgan? I'm Mrs. Chen, the housekeeper. Would you like me to show you to your rooms now?" Eliza nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. She followed Mrs. Chen through corridors lined with expensive art that seemed chosen for investment value rather than personal taste. Nothing in the house suggested the personality of its owner, no family photos, no mementos, no signs of a life lived rather than merely managed. Her quarters, as Dominic had called them, turned out to be a luxurious suite that included a bedroom, sitting room, bathroom, and walk-in closet, already filled with clothing in her size. "Mr. Blackwood had his stylist select a wardrobe appropriate for your new position," Mrs. Chen explained, gesturing to the rows of designer clothes. "If anything doesn't fit or isn't to your taste, please let me know." "Thank you," Eliza managed, trying not to think about strangers selecting her clothing, measuring her for dresses she never asked for. "Dinner is served at 7 in the main dining room, Mrs. Chen continued, "though Mr. Blackwood often takes his meals in his office. Would you prefer to dine in the dining room or here in your suite?" The thought of sitting alone at a massive dining table made Eliza's chest tighten. "Here, please. At least for tonight." Mrs. Chen nodded, her expression revealing nothing. "Very good, Miss Morgan. Or should I say Mrs. Blackwood?" The name hit Eliza like a splash of cold water. Mrs. Blackwood. She was someone's wife, now a stranger's wife. A wife in name only, but still. "Eliza's fine," she said quietly. "Just Eliza." After Mrs. Chen left, Eliza sank onto the edge of the bed, finally allowing the tears she'd been holding back all day to fall. What had she done? Had she made a terrible mistake? But then she thought of her mother, who had been transferred that morning to the country's leading oncology center, where the experimental treatment would begin immediately. No, not a mistake, a sacrifice. One she would make 1,000 times over. She wiped her tears, straightened her shoulders, and began to unpack the few personal belongings she'd brought from her old life. A framed photo of her and her mother at her college graduation. A well-worn copy of Jane Eyre, her favorite novel. A small ceramic elephant her mother had brought back from her only overseas trip years ago. These small tokens of her real life seemed out of place in the pristine luxury of her new surroundings, but they were lifelines to who she really was, not Mrs. Dominic Blackwood, but Eliza Morgan, a woman who would do anything for the people she loved. The first month passed in a blur of adjustments. Eliza's mother responded well to the initial treatments, a fact that Eliza clung to during lonely nights in her gilded cage. Meanwhile, she underwent a transformation orchestrated by Dominic's efficient team designer wardrobe fittings, etiquette refreshers, briefings on Blackwood Innovation's history, and key players. She learned the rules quickly, maintain the illusion in public, give each other space in private. Dominic worked incessantly, often not returning until late evening. When they did share space, conversation remained perfunctory. He asked about her mother's progress with clinical detachment. She provided updates with equal restraint. "The doctors are optimistic," she told him one evening when they crossed paths in the kitchen, where she had gone for a late-night cup of tea. "The tumor has already shown signs of shrinking." Dominic nodded, his expression unchanged. "Good. The medical team will continue to send me weekly reports." "Thank you," Eliza said automatically. The words feeling inadequate for what he was doing, regardless of his motives, for everything you're doing for her. It's part of our agreement, he replied, effectively reminding her that his actions stemmed from contract, not compassion. Their first public appearance came at the annual Blackwood Innovations charity gala. Eliza wore a midnight blue gown that cost more than her previous car. Her mother's wedding ring resized to fit her finger alongside the ostentatious diamond Dominic had provided for appearances. Remember, he murmured as they stepped from the limousine, cameras flashing, you're madly in love with me. Eliza plastered on her practiced smile, leaning into him as his arm circled her waist. And you with me, darling. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, perhaps before his mask of polite affection returned. They played their parts flawlessly. Eliza charmed board members with her genuine interest in the company's medical innovations. Dominic kept her close, his hand resting possessively at the small of her back. To outsiders, they appeared the perfect power couple, the brilliant CEO and his compassionate, articulate wife. You've certainly kept this lovely creature hidden, Dominic, remarked an elderly board member, his eyes twinkling as he kissed Eliza's hand. Where have you been hiding her all these years? Waiting for me to notice what was right in front of me, Dominic replied smoothly, his arm tightening around Eliza's waist. Some treasures reveal themselves only when you're ready to see them. The romantic sentiment, delivered with such conviction, almost made Eliza believe it herself. Almost. How did you two meet? Asked the board member's wife, clearly enchanted by the notion of the notorious bachelor finally captured. Eliza froze momentarily. They hadn't discussed a cover story. She spilled champagne on me, Dominic said, surprising her with the truth, and then looked me directly in the eye and apologized without a hint of flattery or fear. I was intrigued immediately. Love at first sight? The woman pressed, clearly hoping for romance. Love at first honest moment, Dominic corrected, his gaze meeting Eliza's with unexpected intensity. In a world of people who tell me what they think I want to hear, Eliza has always been refreshingly authentic. The compliment, woven with threads of truth, caught Eliza off guard. She found herself blushing genuinely, adding credibility to their charade. You make it sound far more romantic than it was, she said, playing along. I was mortified about ruining your suit. And I was too busy noticing your eyes to care about Italian wool, he countered, his thumb tracing small circles on her waist, a gesture invisible to others but acutely felt by Eliza. The evening continued in this vein, their performance so convincing that even Eliza sometimes forgot it wasn't real. By the time they returned to the limousine, she felt emotionally drained from maintaining the facade. You performed admirably, Dominic commented on the ride home, his attention already returning to his phone. The board chairman was impressed. High praise from the great Dominic Blackwood, Eliza replied, fatigue making her bolder than usual. Should I curtsy? His eyes lifted from the screen, narrowing slightly. Sarcasm doesn't suit you. Neither does being treated like an employee who's just completed a satisfactory performance review, yet here we are. The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but something close. Point taken. You did well tonight, Eliza. Thank you. It was the first time he'd thanked her for anything, and the unexpected sincerity in his voice silenced her retort. The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm. Eliza visited her mother daily at the treatment center, heartened by her improving condition. She explored the vast mansion that was now her home, finding solace in its extensive gardens and library. Dominic remained an enigma, present yet distant, polite yet cold, until the day she discovered his secret. 3 months into their arrangement, Eliza was exploring the mansion's extensive library when she noticed something odd about one of the bookshelves. A volume on Monet was slightly askew. When she tried to straighten it, the shelf moved, revealing a hidden door. Curiosity overcame caution. She pushed the door open and found herself in a small, sunlit room filled with paintings. Not the valuable masterpieces that adorn the main halls, but personal works, landscapes, abstract compositions, and portraits, all signed with a simple DB in the corner. She was studying a particularly striking portrait of an elderly woman with kind eyes when his voice came from behind her. My grandmother. Eliza startled, nearly dropping the canvas. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to intrude. Dominic stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. How did you find this place? The book on Monet was slightly askew. When I tried to straighten it, the shelf moved. She carefully returned the painting to its place. These are remarkable. I didn't know you were an artist. I'm not. It's merely a hobby. He moved into the room, hands in his pockets. My grandmother encouraged it. No one else knows. Why keep it secret? These are genuinely good. He shrugged, a surprisingly casual gesture for someone usually so controlled. Dominic Blackwood? Tech mogul and Sunday painter? The business world respects power and innovation, not artistic sensitivity. That's rather sad, Eliza said before she could stop herself. It's reality. He picked up a half-finished canvas from an easel in the corner. My grandmother understood. She was the only one who saw beyond the Blackwood name and expectations. For the first time, Eliza glimpsed something genuine beneath his carefully constructed facade, a vulnerability he kept hidden from the world. It humanized him in a way that all his wealth and power had failed to do. "I won't tell anyone," she promised softly. He studied her for a long moment. "I believe you won't." An awkward silence fell between them, neither sure how to proceed after this unexpected moment of connection. "Would you like to join me for dinner tonight?" Dominic finally asked. "Unless you have other plans." The invitation surprised her. They had never shared a meal outside of public appearances. "I'd like that," she replied, curious about this small crack in his armor. That night, they dined together in the smaller, more intimate family dining room rather than the formal one used for guests. The conversation started haltingly but gradually eased into something almost comfortable as they discussed art, literature, and her mother's improving condition. "My grandmother raised me after my parents died," Dominic revealed unexpectedly over dessert. "Car accident when I was 10, she was the only one who understood my need to create, not just acquire." "Is that why you started Blackwood Innovations?" Eliza asked. "To create?" A shadow crossed his face. "Partly. Also, to prove something to a world that saw only a traumatized child with too much inheritance and not enough guidance." "And have you proven whatever you needed to prove?" Dominic considered the question, swirling the wine in his glass. "Professionally, yes. Personally." He trailed off, then changed the subject. "Tell me about your mother. She raised you alone?" Eliza nodded, accepting the deflection. "Since I was 5, my father decided family life wasn't for him and disappeared to start over in Australia. Mom worked 3 jobs sometimes to make sure I had opportunities." "That explains your determination," Dominic observed, "and your willingness to enter our arrangement." "She sacrificed everything for me," Eliza said simply. "How could I do any less for her?" Something shifted in Dominic's expression, respect, perhaps, or recognition of a kindred spirit who understood sacrifice. It wasn't friendship exactly, but it was something more than the cold business arrangement they'd started with. After that night, subtle changes began to appear in their relationship. Dominic began arriving home earlier. They developed a routine of sharing dinner when his schedule permitted. He asked about her day with what seemed like genuine interest. She found herself looking forward to their conversations. When her mother's condition stabilized enough for a weekend visit outside the treatment center, Dominic surprised Eliza by offering his private jet and accompanying her. "You don't have to come," Eliza said, confused by the gesture. "I should meet my mother-in-law," he replied simply, "even in our unique circumstance." Margaret Morgan was no fool. Though weakened by treatment, her mind remained sharp, her gaze assessing as Dominic entered her hospital room with an armful of gardenias, her favorite flowers, which Eliza had mentioned once in passing. "So you're the billionaire who bought my daughter," Margaret stated bluntly after introductions. "Mom," Eliza gasped. Dominic, however, didn't flinch. "I prefer to think of it as recognizing her value when the healthcare system failed to do so." Margaret's eyebrows rose. "Smooth answer. But let me be clear. Eliza is the most precious thing in my life. If this arrangement hurts her in any way..." "It won't!" Dominic interrupted, his voice firm. "You have my word!" Something passed between them, an understanding that transcended words. Margaret nodded slowly, then changed the subject, asking about his company's latest medical innovations with genuine curiosity. Later, as Eliza walked him to the door, she struggled to articulate her feelings. "Thank you for coming, for the flowers, for everything, really." Dominic hesitated, then reached out to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture startlingly intimate. "Your mother is remarkable. I see where you get your strength." The compliment warmed her more than it should have. "Will you be back tomorrow?" "I have meetings, but I'll send the car for you whenever you're ready to return." Eliza watched him walk away, confused by the disappointment she felt at his departure. That night, her mother fixed her with a knowing look. "You're falling for him." "Don't be ridiculous," Eliza protested too quickly. "It's a business arrangement." "Sweetheart, I've seen how you look at him. More importantly, I've seen how he looks at you when you're not watching." "And how is that?" Margaret smiled weakly, like a man who's found something precious and is terrified of breaking it. Eliza dismissed her mother's observation, but the words lingered in her mind during the quiet hours of the night. Was it possible that Dominic felt something beyond their contractual obligations? And more disturbingly, was it possible that she did too? The thought terrified her. Developing feelings for a man who had explicitly stated their relationship was nothing more than a business transaction seemed like a recipe for heartbreak. Yet she couldn't deny the warmth that spread through her chest when he smiled, those rare, genuine smiles that transformed his face and hinted at the man beneath the carefully constructed facade. My dear viewers, have you ever found yourself developing feelings where you least expected? Where your head warns you to be careful, but your heart refuses to listen? If you haven't subscribed yet, you're missing out on stories that could help you navigate your own unexpected emotions. Our community shares their experiences in the comments, supporting each other through life's complex journeys. Don't let fear keep you from the wisdom these stories provide. Subscribe now, or tell me in the comments why you're holding back from joining our family of deep thinkers and emotional explorers. 6 months into their marriage, the lines between pretense and reality began to blur. Their public appearances felt less like performances. Dominic's touch lingered longer than necessary. Eliza found herself seeking his company rather than avoiding it. When a tabloid published photos of them walking hand in hand through Central Park with the headline, "Blackwood's Bride," the woman who tamed Tech's most eligible bachelor, Dominic merely shrugged. "Does it bother you?" Eliza asked, studying his reaction as they sat in his home office. The newspaper spread between them. The invasion of privacy? Always. The content? He glanced at the photo. No. We look convincing. They did. The camera had captured a moment when Eliza had said something amusing, and Dominic was looking at her with genuine warmth. His usual stern expression softened into something that resembled happiness. "Is that all that matters? Being convincing?" Eliza asked, unable to keep a hint of hurt from her voice. Dominic looked up, studying her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "What are you really asking, Eliza?" She hesitated, then gathered her courage. "I'm asking if this is still just a performance for you, if I'm still just fulfilling a contract." The silence that followed seemed endless. Dominic rose from his desk and moved to the window, his back to her, as he gazed out at the manicured gardens below. "I don't know," he finally admitted, his voice so quiet she had to strain to hear it. "I don't know what this is anymore." The confession, incomplete as it was, sent a flutter of hope through Eliza's chest. Before she could respond, his phone rang, an important call from Tokyo that couldn't wait. The moment passed, but something had shifted between them. A door cracked open that neither could fully close again. That evening, he invited her to his studio to see his latest painting, a landscape of the lake where his grandmother had taught him to paint. As they stood side by side before the canvas, Eliza realized how comfortable their silence had become. "Why me?" she asked suddenly. "For this arrangement, you could have chosen anyone: models, socialites, women from your social circle." Dominic considered the question carefully. "The night we met, when you spilled champagne on me, you were mortified. But then you looked me directly in the eye and apologized, without groveling or flirting. You were authentic in a room full of people performing for my benefit." He paused. "I remembered that when I needed someone I could trust not to exploit the situation. And have I met your expectations?" His gaze shifted from the painting to her face. "You've exceeded them in every way." The air between them charged with unspoken possibility. For a breathless moment, Eliza thought he might kiss her. Instead, he stepped back, clearing his throat. "It's getting late. You should rest." That night, Eliza lay awake, confronting an uncomfortable truth. She was developing real feelings for her contractual husband, feelings that had no place in their arrangement. Feelings that would only lead to heartbreak when their year ended and they went their separate ways. But what if it didn't have to end? What if the growing warmth between them could evolve into something real and lasting? The hope was as terrifying as it was exhilarating. 8 months into their arrangement, everything changed. Eliza received the call while Dominic was in Tokyo closing a major acquisition. Her mother had developed complications. The treatment wasn't working as hoped. She needed to come immediately. She left a message with his assistant and rushed to the hospital, where she spent 3 days at her mother's bedside as doctors fought to stabilize her condition. On the 4th morning, exhausted and heartsick, Eliza stepped out to find coffee, only to return and find Dominic sitting beside her mother's bed, engaged in quiet conversation. He rose when he saw her, dark circles under his eyes, suggesting he'd come directly from the airport. "Why didn't you call me directly?" he asked, his voice rough with what sounded like concern. "You were in the middle of the Nakamura deal. I didn't want to disturb you." "Disturb me?" Something flashed in his eyes, hurt, perhaps, or anger. "Eliza, you're my wife." On paper, she reminded him, the words tasting bitter. "Is that all this is to you now? Paper?" Before she could answer, a nurse entered to check Margaret's vitals, and the moment passed. Dominic stayed, making calls from the hospital corridor, arranging for specialists to consult on Margaret's case, ensuring Eliza ate and rested. "You need to take care of yourself," he insisted, placing a sandwich in front of her. "You can't help your mother if you collapse." "I can't leave her," Eliza protested, though her body ached with fatigue. "I'll stay with her," Dominic promised. "If anything changes, I'll come get you immediately." Reluctantly, Eliza agreed to rest in the waiting room. When she woke hours later, disoriented and stiff from the uncomfortable couch, she found Dominic's suit jacket draped over her like a blanket. The simple gesture of care brought tears to her eyes. On the 5th day, when Margaret's condition finally stabilized, he drove Eliza home himself, insisting she needed proper sleep. As they entered the mansion, the exhaustion and emotional strain of the week caught up with her, and she swayed on her feet. Dominic caught her before she could fall, lifting her effortlessly into his arms. "When did you last sleep properly?" I don't remember, she admitted, too tired to protest as he carried her not to a room in the East Wing, but to his own suite. You'll rest better here, he said, laying her gently on his bed. I'll be in the sitting room if you need anything. Half delirious with fatigue, Eliza caught his hand as he turned to leave. Stay, please. He hesitated, then carefully lay down beside her, maintaining a respectful distance until she curled against him, seeking comfort in his solid presence. His arm came around her cautiously, as if she might shatter. I was scared, she whispered into the darkness. Not just for Mom, but that you wouldn't come. His hold tightened. I will always come when you need me, Eliza. Always. She fell asleep with his heartbeat steady beneath her ear, and for the first time in days, found peace. When she woke hours later, sunlight filtering through unfamiliar curtains, Dominic was gone. A note on the pillow beside her read simply, "Meeting with your mother's doctors at 2 p.m. Car will be waiting whenever you're ready." Eliza showered and changed, feeling more rested than she had in days. When she arrived at the hospital, she found Dominic deep in conversation with her mother's oncologist, his expression grave but determined. "There you are," he said when he saw her, extending his hand to draw her into the conversation. Dr. Patel was just explaining the new treatment protocol he's recommending. The doctor nodded. "As I was telling your husband, the current approach isn't producing the results we'd hoped for. There's a new combination therapy showing promise in cases like your mother's, but it's even more experimental than what we've been doing." "What are the chances it will work?" Eliza asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Honestly, about 30%. But without it, I'm afraid the prognosis is poor." Eliza felt the floor tilt beneath her. Dominic's arm came around her waist, supporting her. "What do you recommend, doctor?" he asked.
"I recommend we try. Your mother is strong, Miss Morgan. She's fighting hard. This might give her the edge she needs."
"Then we do it," Eliza said firmly. "Whatever it takes." Dr. Patel nodded. "I'll make the arrangements. We'll start tomorrow." After he left, Eliza turned to Dominic. "Thank you for being here, for handling all this while I was sleeping." "You don't need to thank me," he replied, his voice gentler than she'd ever heard it. "This is what," he paused, seeming to search for the right words. "This is what people do for those they care about." The simple statement, so at odds with the cold businessman who had proposed their arrangement, made Eliza's heart ache with confused longing. She wanted to ask what he meant, to define the shifting boundaries between them. But this wasn't the time or place. Instead, she squeezed his hand. "Let's go see Mom." Margaret was awake but weak, her once vibrant face now gaunt and pale. Still, her eyes brightened when she saw them enter together. "My two favorite people," she said, her voice thin but warm. "Come to spring me from this place?" "Not just yet, Mom," Eliza said, taking her hand. "Dr. Patel wants to try a new treatment." "More needles and machines?" Margaret sighed. "I'm tired, sweetheart." "I know," Eliza whispered, fighting back tears. "But please, just a little longer, for me." Margaret's gaze shifted to Dominic. "And for you? Son-in-law?" Dominic stepped forward, surprising both women by taking Margaret's other hand. "For both of us, if you would." A knowing smile touched Margaret's lips. "Well, when you put it that way, I suppose I can endure a few more needles." When Margaret drifted back to sleep, Eliza and Dominic retreated to the small waiting area. "She likes you," Eliza observed. "The feeling is mutual," Dominic replied. "She reminds me of my grandmother, straight-talking, perceptive." "She thinks you care about me," Eliza said, the words escaping before she could reconsider them. "Really care, I mean, beyond our arrangement." Dominic was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Your mother is a very perceptive woman," he finally said, neither confirming nor denying her observation. Before Eliza could press further, his phone rang, another business emergency that couldn't wait. The pattern of their lives reasserted itself, moments of connection interrupted by the demands of the empire he had built. Yet something had undeniably changed between them. In the days that followed, Dominic rearranged his schedule to accompany Eliza to the hospital whenever possible. They shared meals, conversations, and quiet moments of companionship that felt increasingly natural. The pretense of their marriage began to feel less like an act and more like a relationship in transition, uncertain, fragile, but growing toward something neither had anticipated. When Margaret's condition worsened again 2 weeks later, the doctors confirmed what Eliza had feared: the treatment had failed. Her mother had months, not years. Dominic found her in the garden, staring unseeing at the roses her mother would never see bloom. He sat beside her in silence, offering his presence when words would only ring hollow. "I want to take her home," Eliza finally said, "not to her apartment, but somewhere beautiful, somewhere she can spend her remaining time in peace, not surrounded by hospital walls." The next day, Dominic presented her with keys to a beachfront property on a quiet stretch of coastline. "It was my grandmother's favorite place," he explained. "The master suite has been modified for medical equipment, a full-time nurse will be available but discreet." Eliza stared at him, overwhelmed by the gesture. Dominic? I don't know what to say. Say you'll let me help you through this, he replied, his usual composure slipping to reveal genuine emotion, not as your contractual husband, but as someone who cares for you. Deeply. The admission hung between them, changing everything and nothing at once. Their arrangement had evolved into something neither had anticipated, something real and fragile and frightening in its intensity. I care for you too, Eliza whispered, the truth of it resonating through her entire being, more than I should, more than makes sense. Dominic reached for her then, drawing her into his arms. Their first real embrace, not for show, not for comfort, but as an expression of feelings too complex for words. He pressed his lips to her forehead, a gesture so tender it brought tears to her eyes. We'll figure this out, he promised. Together. At the beach house, Margaret rallied briefly, enjoying the sound of waves and the salt air. She watched Dominic and Eliza together with knowing eyes. He loves you, she told Eliza one evening as they sat on the veranda watching the sunset. Whether he realizes it yet or not, Mom, it's complicated. Love always is, sweetheart, but it's also the only thing that matters in the end. She squeezed Eliza's hand. Promise me you won't let fear rob you of happiness when I'm gone. I promise, Eliza whispered, though she wasn't sure how to keep that promise when their marriage had an expiration date. As Margaret's condition declined, Dominic became a constant presence, handling practical matters with quiet efficiency while offering Eliza emotional support she had never expected. They fell into a routine of shared responsibility and care, their initial roles as contractual partners evolving into something that looked remarkably like a real partnership. One evening, as they walked along the beach after Margaret had fallen asleep, Dominic spoke of his grandmother's final days. I was 22, just starting Blackwood Innovations, he said, his voice low against the rhythm of the waves. She was so proud, but worried I was focusing too much on success and not enough on living. Was she right? Eliza asked gently. Dominic's laugh held no humor. Completely. After she died, I threw myself into work. Building the company became my entire identity. I told myself it was what she would have wanted for me to create something meaningful. But I think what she really wanted was for me to create a life, not just a legacy. It's not too late, Eliza said, her hand finding his in the gathering darkness. He interlaced their fingers, the gesture speaking volumes. No, he agreed softly, perhaps it's not. My friends, sometimes life's most precious gifts come disguised as our greatest challenges. Eliza entered a marriage of convenience only to discover something far more valuable than the financial security she sought. If you're facing difficult choices or unexpected feelings, remember that the path forward isn't always clear, but it's often worth taking. Our subscriber community shares their own stories of finding love in unexpected places, stories that might help you navigate your own journey. Don't miss out on these insights that could change your perspective forever. Subscribe now, or if something's holding you back, share your thoughts in the comments. Remember, those who hesitate often miss the very wisdom they need most. Margaret passed peacefully 2 months later, with Eliza and Dominic at her bedside. In the days that followed, he never left Eliza's side, handling arrangements, shielding her from decisions she was too grief-stricken to make, holding her through nights when sorrow seemed bottomless. I keep expecting to hear her voice. Eliza confessed one night, curled against Dominic's chest in what had become their shared bedroom, to see her sitting on the veranda, watching the waves. She's still here, Dominic said softly, stroking her hair. In the strength you show, every day, in your kindness, your determination. I don't feel strong, Eliza whispered. I feel lost. Then let me be your compass until you find your way again. The simple promise, offered without expectation or condition, touched something deep in Eliza's heart. This man, who had once approached their relationship as a business transaction, now offered her the one thing she needed most: unconditional support. After the funeral, they remained at the beach house, suspended in a liminal space between their contractual arrangement and something deeper neither dared name. Their year was nearly complete. Soon, papers would be filed, settlements arranged, separate lives resumed. One evening, as they walked along the shoreline at sunset, Dominic broke their companionable silence. The board meeting is next week. Our arrangement technically concludes the day after. Eliza's heart constricted. She'd been avoiding thoughts of their impending separation, focusing instead on processing her grief. Yes, I remember. I've had the lawyers prepare everything as agreed. His voice was carefully neutral, his gaze fixed on the horizon. The settlement will provide for you comfortably. Thank you. The words felt hollow. Inadequate for all he'd done, not just fulfilling their contract, but going far beyond it in ways that had transformed her life. They walked further in silence, the space between them heavy with unspoken feelings. Finally, Eliza gathered her courage. What happens after? To us? Dominic stopped, turning to face her as waves lapped gently at their feet. That depends entirely on what you want, Eliza. What I want? She searched his face, finding his careful mask had slipped, revealing vulnerability she'd rarely glimpsed. I thought this was your decision, your arrangement. It was, he acknowledged, but somewhere along the way, it became something else entirely. He took a deep breath. I find myself reluctant to end our marriage. Hope fluttered in her chest, fragile and terrifying. Because of the board? Your image? Because I've fallen in love with you. The confession hung between them, carried on salt air and sea spray. Eliza stared at him, searching for any sign of calculation or pretense, finding only raw honesty in his eyes. When your mother was ill, he continued, words coming faster now, as if a dam had broken, I realized that the thought of you suffering alone was unbearable. That somewhere between our dinners and conversations and quiet moments, you'd become essential to me, not as an asset or a business arrangement, but as the woman I want to build a life with. Eliza's eyes filled with tears. I promised my mother I wouldn't let fear rob me of happiness. And what would make you happy, Eliza? His voice was barely audible above the waves. Staying, she whispered. Not because of a contract or obligation, but because I've fallen in love with the man behind the CEO, the artist, the grandson who honors his grandmother's memory, the man who held my hand through the darkest days of my life. Dominic closed the distance between them, cradling her face in his hands with a tenderness that belied his usual control. Then stay. Be my wife, not for appearances or business, but because we choose each other. Every day. Their first real kiss tasted of salt and promise, sealing a new agreement, one written not on paper, but on their hearts. The transformation in their lives was profound but subtle. They moved back to the mansion, but now shared the master suite. Dominic delegated more responsibilities at work, making time for the relationship they were building. Eliza began working with a foundation that supported families facing catastrophic medical expenses, finding purpose in helping others navigate the system that had nearly broken her. 6 months after Margaret's passing, Dominic surprised Eliza with a canvas wrapped in simple brown paper. What's this? She asked, curious. Something I've been working on, he replied, an uncharacteristic nervousness in his voice. You don't have to like it. Eliza unwrapped the package to find a portrait of her mother, painted from a photograph taken during those peaceful days at the beach house. The likeness was remarkable. But more striking was the way Dominic had captured Margaret's essence, her wisdom, her strength, her unconditional love. Dominic, Eliza breathed, tears filling her eyes. It's perfect. It's her. I thought we could hang it in the living room, he said quietly. If you want, she should be part of our home. In that moment, Eliza understood the depth of his love not just for her, but for the woman who had shaped her, whose absence still ached like a physical wound. He was offering not just to remember Margaret, but to honor her as family. I love you, she said. The words simple but profound. Not for what you can give me, or what you can do for me, but for who you are. Dominic's smile, open, vulnerable, real, was answer enough. 1 year to the day after their contract wedding, they renewed their vows on the beach at sunset. This time, there were no lawyers, no contracts, no pretense, just two people who had found love in the most unexpected circumstances, promising to choose each other every day for the rest of their lives. When I asked you to marry me the first time, Dominic said, holding her hands as waves crashed behind them, I thought I was offering you salvation. I never expected you would be saving me instead. Eliza smiled through her tears. Perhaps we saved each other. My dear viewers, if this story has touched your heart, please don't keep it to yourself. Hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear that love can find us in the most unexpected ways. Our subscriber family grows stronger with each new member, and we'd love for you to join us. If you're still hesitating to subscribe, ask yourself, can you really afford to miss stories that remind us of our capacity for growth and transformation? The subscribe button is waiting, but if something's holding you back, I genuinely want to know why in the comments below. 3 years later, Eliza stood in the gallery surrounded by Dominic's paintings, watching with pride as art critics and collectors admired his work. The exhibition, his first public showing, had been her idea, a way to share the talent he'd hidden for so long. Mrs. Blackwood? A reporter approached, notepad in hand. How does it feel to have transformed one of the business world's most notorious bachelors into both a devoted husband and now an acclaimed artist? Eliza smiled, spotting Dominic across the room, deep in conversation with a museum curator. I didn't transform him, she corrected gently. I simply loved the man he already was beneath the surface. And the rumors that you initially married for his money? People love simple narratives, she replied, fingering the locket around her neck that contained a photo of her mother. The truth is always more complex. Sometimes we make choices for one reason, only to discover they lead us somewhere entirely unexpected. Later that night, as they lay tangled together in their bed, Dominic traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. The Margaret Morgan Foundation received full funding today. The clinical trial will begin next month. Eliza propped herself up to look at him. The foundation, established in her mother's memory to help families afford experimental cancer treatments, had become their shared passion. That's wonderful news. Your mother would be proud of what you've accomplished, he said softly. Of what we've accomplished, she corrected, placing his hand over her still flat stomach where their child had just begun to grow. All of it. Dominic's eyes widened as understanding dawned. Eliza? Are you? She nodded, joy bubbling up inside her. 12 weeks. I wanted to be sure before I told you. His expression transformed with wonder as he gathered her close. I never imagined I could be this happy. He confessed against her hair. When I proposed our arrangement, I thought I was offering you salvation. I never expected you would be saving me instead. Eliza smiled, thinking of the unlikely journey that had brought them here, from a business transaction to a love that had healed them both. Perhaps we saved each other. Outside their window, waves crashed against the shore of the beach house they now called home, a constant reminder that sometimes the most precious things in life come disguised as practical decisions, and that love, when given room to grow, can transform even the most carefully constructed arrangements into something real and lasting and beautiful. In the quiet darkness, Dominic whispered against her lips, "Thank you for marrying me, to save your mother." And Eliza whispered back, "Thank you for falling in love with me anyway." The Margaret Morgan Foundation became the cornerstone of Eliza and Dominic's shared purpose. Named in honor of the woman whose illness had brought them together, the foundation provided financial assistance to families facing catastrophic medical expenses, particularly for experimental treatments not covered by insurance. We need to focus on single parents, Eliza insisted during one of their planning meetings 6 months after the foundation's launch. They're the most vulnerable, often falling through the cracks of existing support systems. Dominic nodded, making notes on his tablet. We should also consider a mentorship program connecting patients with similar diagnoses, creating support networks beyond financial assistance. They worked side by side, their complementary strengths, creating something neither could have built alone. Eliza brought compassion, personal experience, and an intuitive understanding of what families needed most. Dominic contributed business acumen, strategic thinking, and the connections necessary to secure substantial funding. The foundation's first gala, held on the anniversary of Margaret's passing, raised over $10 million, far exceeding their expectations. As they stood on stage together, thanking donors and sharing stories of families already helped, Eliza felt her mother's presence so strongly she almost looked over her shoulder, expecting to see Margaret's proud smile. She would have loved this, Dominic whispered, seeming to read her thoughts as they left the stage, seeing her daughter changing lives. She would have loved you, Eliza replied, squeezing his hand, for seeing me when I felt invisible, for valuing what I could offer beyond our arrangement. Later that night, as they prepared for bed, Dominic seemed unusually pensive. He sat on the edge of the mattress, turning something over in his hands. "What's that?" Eliza asked, curious about his distracted state. He opened his palm to reveal a small, worn silver locket. It was my grandmother's. She gave it to me before she died, told me to give it to the woman who made me whole again. His voice caught slightly. I never thought I'd find her. Eliza's breath hitched as he stood and moved behind her, fastening the delicate chain around her neck. The locket rested just above her heart, warm against her skin. "Open it," he urged softly. Inside was a tiny, exquisite painting, no larger than a postage stamp of a sunrise over water. On the opposite side, newly added, was a miniature portrait of Margaret, painted with such care that her essence seemed captured in each microscopic brushstroke. "Dominic," Eliza whispered, tears blurring her vision. "It's beautiful." "Two extraordinary women," he said, his arms encircling her from behind, "both of whom saw beyond the man I pretended to be to the man I could become." Eliza turned in his embrace, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of the gift and the journey that had brought them to this moment. "I love you," she said simply, the words still new enough to feel miraculous each time they were spoken. His kiss was tender, reverent, a promise renewed with each passing day. My dear viewers, true love manifests in these quiet moments of profound understanding. The grand gestures make for good stories, but it's in the small, thoughtful acts that we see the depth of someone's heart. If you've experienced this kind of love or long to, I invite you to join our community of seekers and finders by subscribing now. Our subscribers tell me these stories help them recognize love's subtle signs in their own lives. Can you really afford to miss insights that might help you identify the love that's already surrounding you? Hit subscribe or share in the comments what's holding you back from joining our family of emotional explorers. As their second wedding anniversary approached the anniversary of their vow renewal, which they considered their true wedding date, Dominic surprised Eliza with news that would once again transform their lives. "I've been thinking." He began one evening as they sat on their beach house veranda, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. about stepping back from day-to-day operations at Blackwood. Eliza turned to him, surprised. Really? You love your work? I do, he acknowledged. But I've built a strong executive team. The company doesn't need me micromanaging every decision anymore. He took her hand, his expression earnest. And there are other things I want to focus on now. Like what? She asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. The foundation for one, my art, which you've encouraged me to take seriously. And he hesitated, a rare vulnerability crossing his face. I've been thinking about family. Our family. Eliza's heart quickened. They had discussed children in abstract terms, something for the future, but never with any specificity. What about our family? I want to build one with you, he said simply. Not just the two of us, but children. A home filled with the kind of love your mother gave you, the kind my grandmother tried to give me. Joy bloomed in Eliza's chest, but she tempered it with practical considerations. Your work schedule will change, he interrupted gently. I'm not my father, Eliza. I won't be an absent parent, too busy building an empire to notice my child growing up. When we have a family, I want to be present for every moment. The conviction in his voice, the certainty of his commitment, moved her deeply. This was so far from the man who had proposed their business arrangement, the man who had compartmentalized his life so completely that he kept his art hidden behind secret doors. I want that too, she admitted. I've been afraid to bring it up, worried about timing, about the foundation being so new. About what? He prompted when she trailed off. About whether I'd be a good mother without my own mother here to guide me, she confessed, voicing a fear she'd barely acknowledged to herself. Dominic's expression softened with understanding. Your mother lives in you, Eliza. In your compassion, your strength, your capacity for love. Any child would be blessed to have you as their mother. His faith in her, unwavering and sincere, eased the ache of Margaret's absence. Then yes, she said, a smile breaking through her tears. Let's build our family. They began trying for a baby with the same blend of hope and pragmatism that characterized their relationship. Months passed without success, each disappointment testing their resilience but ultimately strengthening their bond. It will happen when it's meant to, Dominic reassured her after another negative test, holding her close as she fought back tears of frustration. And if it doesn't happen naturally, we have options. We'll be parents, Eliza, one way or another. His steadfastness anchored her through the emotional roller coaster of trying to conceive. This man, once so controlled and distant, now offered unwavering emotional support through each hope and disappointment. Meanwhile, life continued to evolve around them. The foundation expanded its reach, helping hundreds of families navigate medical crises. Dominic gradually transitioned leadership responsibilities at Blackwood Innovations, promoting talented executives who shared his vision while maintaining his role as chairman. And at Eliza's encouragement, he began showing his art in small, private exhibitions, tentative steps towards sharing the talent he had hidden for so long. It was after one such exhibition, where a respected gallery owner had expressed interest in representing him, that Eliza began feeling unusually tired. She dismissed it as stress and excitement until morning sickness confirmed what she had begun to suspect. The day she confirmed her pregnancy was the 3-year anniversary of Margaret's passing, a bittersweet convergence that felt somehow right, as if her mother had orchestrated this gift from beyond. Eliza planned a special way to tell Dominic. She wrapped a small box containing the positive pregnancy test and placed it beside his morning coffee, her heart racing with anticipation. "What's this?" he asked, eyebrows raised in surprise when he found the package. "Open it and see," she replied, trying to contain her excitement. His expression as he lifted the lid and understood its contents was everything she had hoped for, shock transforming into wonder, then joy so pure it brought tears to his eyes. "Eliza," he breathed, looking up at her with awe. Are you? She nodded, her own eyes filling with happy tears. 12 weeks. I wanted to be sure before I told you. Dominic was on his feet in an instant, gathering her into his arms with a gentleness that belied his excitement. "A baby," he whispered against her hair. "Our baby." That night, as they lay in bed discussing names and nursery colors, Dominic placed his hand reverently on her still flat stomach. "I never imagined I could be this happy," he confessed. "When I proposed our arrangement, I thought I was offering you salvation. I never expected you would be saving me instead." Eliza smiled, thinking of the unlikely journey that had brought them here, from a business transaction to a love that had healed them both. Perhaps we saved each other. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, their excitement growing with each ultrasound and each tiny flutter of movement. They decided not to learn the baby's gender, preferring the surprise. The nursery took shape in soft neutrals, a peaceful space filled with books, stuffed animals, and a rocking chair positioned perfectly to catch the morning light. "My grandmother used to rock me here," Dominic explained as he placed the restored antique chair in the corner of the nursery. "She would tell me stories about my parents, keeping their memory alive for me." I want to do the same for our child. Tell them about Margaret, about the extraordinary woman who raised you. Eliza's heart swelled with love for this man who understood so perfectly what she needed to keep her mother present in their child's life, even if only through stories and memories. As her due date approached, they moved temporarily to the beach house, both feeling it was the right place to welcome their child into the world. The medical team Dominic assembled assured them that despite the remote location, every precaution was in place for a safe delivery. Your mother loved it here, Dominic reminded her as they walked slowly along the shore one evening, her hand resting on her prominent belly. It seems fitting that her grandchild should take their first breath in a place where she found peace. Eliza nodded, unable to speak past the emotion clogging her throat. These moments of perfect understanding, when Dominic intuited her deepest feelings without her having to express them, still took her breath away. Labor began on a stormy night, waves crashing against the shore as rain lashed the windows. Despite the carefully laid plans, their baby seemed determined to make a dramatic entrance. The contractions progressed too quickly for the specialist to arrive from the city. The local midwife is on her way, Dominic assured her, his calm voice belying the concern in his eyes as he timed her contractions. She'll be here in 20 minutes. I don't think we have 20 minutes, Eliza gasped, gripping his hand as another contraction seized her. She was right. Their daughter entered the world just 15 minutes later, delivered by Dominic himself, with only phone guidance from the midwife who was still fighting her way through the storm. She's perfect, he whispered, tears streaming unashamedly down his face as he placed their squalling, red-faced infant on Eliza's chest. Absolutely perfect. They named her Margaret Grace Blackwood, a tribute to the woman whose illness had brought them together, and to the unexpected grace that had transformed their business arrangement into a family bound by love. As Dominic held their daughter for the first time, his expression of wonder and fierce protectiveness told Eliza everything she needed to know about the kind of father he would be: present, devoted, and determined to give their child the stable, loving home he himself had lost too young. "Hello, little one," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "You are so loved, so very loved." In that moment, watching her once cold, businesslike husband cradle their daughter with such tenderness, Eliza felt her mother's presence more strongly than ever. This was what Margaret had wanted for her, not just survival, but joy, not just security, but love. The midwife arrived shortly after, checking both mother and baby with professional efficiency before pronouncing them healthy. "You did well, Dad," she told Dominic with an approving nod. Not many first-time fathers could have handled that so calmly. "I had excellent motivation," he replied, his eyes never leaving his daughter's face. Later, as dawn broke over the ocean and the storm cleared, Eliza watched Dominic standing at the window, Margaret cradled against his chest, pointing out the sunrise to their newborn daughter. "That's the sun saying good morning to you," he was telling her softly. "It does that every day, without fail. Just like Mommy and Daddy will love you every day, without fail." The simple promise, spoken to an infant who couldn't possibly understand the words but would surely feel their intent, embodied everything their relationship had become: reliable, steadfast, and infinitely more meaningful than either could have imagined when they signed their marriage contract. My friends, life rarely follows the path we expect. Eliza never planned to marry a stranger for money. Dominic never intended to fall in love with his contractual wife. Yet in the unpredictability of life, they found exactly what they needed. I wonder, how many of you have experienced unexpected blessings disguised as challenges? How many have found love where you least expected it? Our subscriber community shares these profound life insights daily. If you haven't joined us yet, what are you waiting for? Every day without these stories is another day missing wisdom that could illuminate your own path. Subscribe now, or tell me in the comments what's holding you back from being part of our family of seekers and finders. As Margaret grew from infant to toddler, the foundation of love her parents had built continued to strengthen and expand. The Margaret Morgan Foundation flourished, helping thousands of families navigate medical crises with dignity and hope. Dominic's art gained recognition in select circles, though he remained selective about which pieces he shared publicly. Eliza developed a mentorship program for single parents facing medical challenges, offering not just financial support but emotional guidance through impossible choices. Their family expanded again when Margaret was 3. With the arrival of twins, a boy and girl, they named Thomas and Eleanor after Dominic's grandparents. Their home, once a showcase of minimalist luxury, transformed into a vibrant, sometimes chaotic space filled with children's laughter, art projects, and the beautiful mess of family life. On the twins' first birthday, as family and close friends gathered to celebrate, Eliza found Dominic in his studio, putting the finishing touches on a painting he had been working on in secret. "May I see?" she asked, wrapping her arms around him from behind. He stepped aside, revealing a large canvas depicting their entire family on the beach, Eliza holding Eleanor, Dominic with Thomas on his shoulders, and Margaret dancing at the water's edge, her arms outstretched to the sky. The scene captured not just their likenesses, but the essence of their joy together. It's for the children, he explained. So they'll always remember how much they were wanted, how completely they are loved. Eliza studied the painting, noting the small details that made it so special. The locket visible around her painted neck, the subtle suggestion of another figure in the clouds above them, watching over the scene with a benevolent smile. "Mom," she whispered, touching the ethereal presence with gentle fingers. Dominic nodded. "She's always with us, the catalyst who brought us together." "She would be so proud of you," Eliza said, turning to face him. "Of the husband and father you've become." "I hope so," he replied, his voice soft with emotion. "I hope she knows that I understand now what she meant about not letting fear rob you of happiness. For so long, I was afraid to be vulnerable, to need anyone, to let anyone see the real me, until you. Until us," Eliza corrected gently, taking his paint-stained hand and placing it over her heart, where Margaret's locket still rested. "This family we've built together, it's more than I ever dared dream of when I signed that contract." "A contract that expired years ago," Dominic reminded her with a smile. "Yet here you are, still by my side." "Where else would I be?" she asked simply. "This is where I belong." As they rejoined their guest, watching Margaret help the twins with their birthday cake, more of it ending up on faces than in mouths, Eliza reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them here. From a desperate young woman willing to sell her freedom to save her mother, to a fulfilled wife and mother surrounded by love and purpose. From a cold businessman seeking a convenient arrangement, to a devoted husband and father who had found his true calling in family and art. Their story had begun with a transaction, but it had become a testament to the transformative power of love. Love that sees beyond facades. Love that heals old wounds. Love that creates something beautiful from the most unlikely beginning. 5 years to the day after they had renewed their vows on the beach, Dominic surprised Eliza with a return to that same spot at sunset. Their children were with Zoe for the evening, allowing them a rare moment alone. "Do you remember standing here, terrified that our arrangement was ending?" he asked, taking her hands as the waves lapped at their bare feet. "I remember being afraid to hope," she admitted, "afraid that what I felt might be one-sided." "And now?" he prompted, his eyes reflecting the golden light of the setting sun. Eliza smiled, squeezing his hands. "Now I know better. Now I know that what began as a business arrangement became the greatest blessing of my life." Dominic reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "Our original marriage was based on a contract," he said, opening the box to reveal a ring far simpler but more meaningful than her original diamond. A band of intertwined gold and silver, set with 3 small birthstones representing their children. "This is based solely on love. Will you marry me again, Eliza? Not for appearances, not for business, but simply because I fall more in love with you every day." Tears filled her eyes as she nodded. "Yes. 1,000 times. Yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger alongside her wedding band. "I had it inscribed," he said softly. Eliza removed the ring to read the words etched inside, "From transaction to transformation, forever yours." The simple phrase encapsulated their entire journey from the cold business deal that had brought them together to the profound love that had transformed them both. "It's perfect," she whispered, slipping it back onto her finger. "Just like the life we've built together." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, they sealed their recommitment with a kiss that held all the passion, tenderness, and gratitude of their extraordinary journey. 10 years after their original contract wedding, Eliza stood in a gallery in New York City, surrounded by Dominic's paintings. The exhibition, titled Transformations, featured work spanning his artistic journey from early landscapes painted in secret to recent portraits of their family. The centerpiece was a triptych depicting their story. The first panel showing 2 strangers signing papers across a desk. The second capturing Eliza at her mother's bedside, with Dominic standing supportively behind her, and the third revealing their current family, 3 children playing on the beach, while Eliza and Dominic watched with expressions of wonder and gratitude. "Mrs. Blackwood?" A reporter approached, notepad in hand. "How does it feel to have transformed one of the business world's most notorious bachelors into both a devoted husband and now an acclaimed artist?" Eliza smiled, spotting Dominic across the room, deep in conversation with a museum curator. "I didn't transform him," she corrected gently. "I simply loved the man he already was beneath the surface." "And the rumors that you initially married for his money?" "People love simple narratives," she replied, fingering the locket around her neck that contained a photo of her mother. "The truth is always more complex. Sometimes we make choices for one reason, only to discover they lead us somewhere entirely unexpected." The reporter seemed intrigued by this philosophical response. "Do you regret any of it? The circumstances that brought you together?" Eliza considered the question carefully. I regret that my mother's illness caused her suffering. I regret that she isn't here to see her grandchildren grow up. She paused, her gaze finding Dominic again. But I don't regret saying yes to his proposal, even when it was just a business arrangement. Some of life's greatest blessings come disguised as impossible choices. Later that night, as they celebrated the successful exhibition with a quiet dinner at their hotel, Dominic raised his glass in a toast. To Margaret, he said solemnly, "Without whom, we might never have found each other." To Margaret, Eliza echoed, emotion thick in her voice, "who taught me that love is the greatest healer." They clinked glasses, the simple gesture acknowledging the bittersweet reality that sometimes our greatest losses lead to our most profound gains. The foundation approved 5 new families today, Dominic mentioned as they enjoyed their meal, including a single mother with twins who needs the same experimental treatment your mother received. "Will it work for her?" Eliza asked, hope and caution mingling in her voice. "The doctors are optimistic. The treatment has advanced significantly in the past decade." He reached across the table to take her hand. "Because of the foundation, because of you, her children won't lose their mother." The knowledge that they were changing lives, creating ripples of hope that extended far beyond their own family, filled Eliza with a sense of purpose that honored her mother's memory in the most meaningful way possible. "I had a thought," she said, "an idea that had been forming for months, finally crystallizing. What if we expanded the foundation to include housing for families during treatment? So many have to travel far from home, adding financial strain to an already impossible situation." Dominic's eyes lit up with interest. "Like Ronald McDonald House, but specifically for families in experimental treatment programs?" "Exactly, we could call it Margaret's Haven." "I love it," he said immediately. "We could start with a pilot program near the main treatment center, then expand if it proves successful." This was the pattern of their partnership. One would propose an idea, the other would build on it, together creating something neither could have envisioned alone. Their complementary strengths had made the foundation more effective than either could have made it individually. "We make a good team, Mrs. Blackwood," Dominic said, echoing her thoughts. "The best, Mr. Blackwood," she agreed with a smile. As they walked back to their hotel through the bustling New York streets, arm in arm under a canopy of stars obscured by city lights, Eliza reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them here. From that first meeting in his office, where he had proposed a cold business arrangement, to this moment of shared purpose and deep love, it seemed almost miraculous. "Penny for your thoughts," Dominic said, noticing her contemplative expression. "I was just thinking about how far we've come," she replied. "That day in your office, when you proposed our arrangement, did you ever imagine we'd end up here?" He shook his head, a rueful smile playing at his lips. "Not in my wildest dreams. I thought I was making a practical business decision. I had no idea I was actually taking the first step toward the life I never knew I wanted. And now? Now I can't imagine any other life," he said simply. "You, the children, the foundation, my art, this is who I was always meant to be. It just took you spilling champagne on my suit to set me on the right path." Eliza laughed, the sound bright in the night air. "Best clumsy moment of my life." When they returned home the following day, their children greeted them with handmade welcome signs and enthusiastic hugs. Margaret, now 7 and showing signs of her father's artistic talent, presented Dominic with a drawing of his exhibition that she had created based on photos Eliza had sent. The twins, at 4, were less interested in art and more excited about the small gifts their parents had brought from New York. As they settled back into the beautiful chaos of family life, Eliza found herself watching Dominic with their children, patiently helping Margaret with her brushwork, building elaborate block towers with Thomas only to laugh when Eleanor knocked them down, his joy in their antics so genuine and complete. This man, who had once approached marriage as a business transaction, had become a father who treasured every moment with his children. The transformation was so profound that sometimes Eliza had to remind herself of how they began with a contract, not a love story. Yet perhaps that was the most beautiful part of their journey. They had built their relationship backward, beginning with commitment before love, with obligation before desire. And in doing so, they had created a foundation stronger than many relationships that began with passion but lacked the deeper bonds, forged through shared purpose and mutual respect. My friends, sometimes the most beautiful love stories don't follow the expected script. Sometimes they begin with practical considerations rather than romantic feelings. Sometimes the person who seems all wrong for you, too cold, too distant, too different, turns out to be exactly who your heart needs. If you're facing choices that seem impossible, or feelings that seem impractical, remember Eliza and Dominic. Remember that love often finds us when we're busy making other plans. If you found value in their story, please subscribe to join our community of seekers and storytellers. Those who have already subscribed tell me these narratives help them recognize the potential for love in unexpected places. Don't miss out on insights that could help you identify your own path to happiness. Subscribe now, or share in the comments what resonated most with you about Eliza and Dominic's journey. 15 years after their contract wedding, Eliza and Dominic stood together at Margaret's high school graduation. Their daughter, named for the woman who had inadvertently brought them together, was valedictorian, her speech focusing on the power of purpose and the unexpected ways life can unfold. "My parents taught me that sometimes our greatest challenges lead to our greatest blessings," Margaret told her classmates, her confidence and poise belying her youth. "They showed me that love isn't always about grand gestures or perfect timing. Sometimes it's about showing up, day after day, and choosing each other even when it's difficult." Eliza felt tears well in her eyes as she listened to their daughter's wisdom, her hand finding Dominic's between their seats. He squeezed her fingers gently, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "They also taught me that we find our true purpose when we use our own pain to ease someone else's," Margaret continued. "The foundation they built has helped thousands of families face medical crises with dignity and hope. That's the legacy I hope to continue as I begin my pre-med studies this fall." Pride swelled in Eliza's chest. Their daughter had announced her intention to become an oncologist, inspired by the grandmother she had never met, but whose story had shaped her life's direction. After the ceremony, as they gathered for family photos, the twins, now 12, and as different as siblings could be, Thomas, quiet and analytical like his father had once been, Eleanor, vibrant and outspoken like her grandmother, Margaret Eliza, felt a sense of completion that transcended words. "We did good," Dominic murmured, his arm around her waist as they watched their children interact with friends and extended family. "We did," she agreed, leaning into his embrace, "though I'm not sure we can take all the credit. They're their own people. With the best parts of you," he said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Your compassion, your strength, your ability to see beyond surfaces to what truly matters. And the best parts of you," she countered, "your determination, your creativity, your capacity for growth." As the celebration continued around them, Eliza reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. The desperate young woman who had signed a marriage contract to save her mother could never have imagined the life that would unfold from that decision. A life rich with purpose, love, and the kind of happiness that comes not from perfect circumstances, but from facing life's challenges together. That evening, after the graduation festivities had ended and their children were occupied with their own celebrations, Eliza and Dominic returned to the beach house, now their primary residence, a city mansion having been donated years ago to serve as the headquarters for the Margaret Morgan Foundation. They walked along the shoreline as the sun set, a ritual they had maintained throughout their years together. The beach had become sacred ground for them, the place where Margaret had found peace in her final months, where they had renewed their vows, where their children had taken their first steps. "Do you ever think about how differently our lives might have turned out?" Eliza asked as they watched the waves roll in. "If I hadn't spilled champagne on you that night, if you hadn't proposed our arrangement?" Dominic considered the question thoughtfully. "I think about who I was before you," he admitted, "how empty my life was, though I didn't recognize it then, how I measured success in acquisitions and innovations rather than moments and connections. And now? Now I understand what true wealth is," he said simply. "It's not in my bank accounts or stock portfolios. It's in Margaret's compassionate heart and brilliant mind. It's in Thomas's quiet determination and Eleanor's fearless spirit. It's in the families the foundation has helped. And most of all, it's in you, in your love, which transformed me in ways I never thought possible." Eliza's heart swelled with emotion. "When I signed that contract, I thought I was sacrificing my freedom for my mother's life. I never imagined I was actually finding my way home." Dominic drew her into his arms, his expression solemn yet tender. "Thank you for marrying me to save your mother," he whispered against her hair, "and thank you even more for staying when the contract ended." Eliza smiled through tears that reflected the setting sun. "Thank you for falling in love with me anyway." As darkness fell and stars appeared above the ocean, they made their way back to the house hand in hand, their footprints in the sand soon washed away by the tide temporary marks that belied the permanent impact they had made on each other's lives and on the world around them. Their story, which began with a business proposal born of desperation and calculation, had evolved into something neither could have anticipated, a testament to the transformative power of love, the unexpected nature of life's greatest blessings, and the truth that sometimes the most beautiful journeys begin with the most unlikely first steps. My dear friends, as we come to the end of Eliza and Dominic's story, I hope you take with you the understanding that love often arrives in packages we don't expect. Sometimes it's disguised as a business arrangement. Sometimes it's hidden behind walls of protection built from past pain. Sometimes it grows slowly, quietly, until one day we realize that what began as necessity has transformed into the greatest blessing of our lives. If this story touched your heart, Please don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who might need to hear that second chances are possible, that love can grow in the most unlikely soil, that sometimes our most desperate decisions lead to our greatest joy. And if you haven't already, join our storytelling family by subscribing. Every story I share carries wisdom that might illuminate your own path. Those who have already subscribed tell me these narratives have changed how they see their own relationships. Don't miss out on insights that could transform your perspective on love and sacrifice. Subscribe now, or tell me in the comments what resonated most deeply with you. Until next time, this is Mr. Sterling reminding you that sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin with the words, "I'll pay for your mother's cancer treatment if you marry me for 1 year." Remember, love doesn't always arrive with fanfare and fireworks. Sometimes it slips in quietly through the back door of our lives, disguised as something entirely different. But when we have the courage to recognize it, to nurture it, to choose it every day, that's when the magic happens. That's when a business arrangement can transform into a love story for the ages. Thank you for joining me on this journey through Eliza and Dominic's extraordinary love story. May it inspire you to look beyond appearances, to recognize the potential for love in unexpected places, and to remember that sometimes the most precious things in life come disguised as practical decisions. This is Mr. Sterling, wishing you the wisdom to recognize love, even when it arrives in the most unexpected packaging.